Now let's look at some of the slightly advanced features within Sketches. All along now we have managed to create a freehand sketch, which was, as you saw in the previous video, just a TikTok icon. There was no discipline. We didn't follow any constraints, etc. So today I'm going to tell you what you can do within Solidworks and how you can capture the correct dimensions and how you can actually make it a meaningful sketch. What we did previously was very loose. There was no constraint, no discipline to it whatsoever. However, there are tons and tons of help within Solidworks we can employ to get what we need out of it. Let's have a look. Going to open a new file. Now, on this file here, I'm going to go and create a new sketch. Select the top plane, go into sketch environment. Now, what happens when I go into any of these sketch entities? Let's look at it in some detail now. Okay, so for example, if I go into the line command and I want you to pay certain attention to the things happening on the screen, there are lots of prompts and help that come up. So for example, I can click onto the icon and I can go as sketched as it is by default. I can go horizontal, vertical, at an angle for construction X. So there are tons of options. I can pre-select those, or I can change it later on. Let's see what happens when I just literally click. Okay, so my cursor is obviously trying to help, and it's showing me that if I'm about to commit, if I were to click again, I'm going to draw a line which is at 135 degrees. And the 2142 is just the length of the line I'm about to commit to. But if I can draw a longer line, shorter line, etc. And at some point, I want you guys to try and notice there are subtle changes that are happening on the screen right as we speak. So this yellow indicator here, it is telling us that we are about to draw a vertical line. That's what that means. It's basically a constraint, an indicator to say that you're about to commit to a vertical line there. I can move my cursor this way and it will draw a horizontal line for me, and probably around here somewhere it will show me that I am at 45 degrees or 135 degrees. All of that makes kind of sense. It is dynamic help, which is telling you that if you are going to any of these standard line types, click now. It's precisely telling you that you are in the right direction if you wanted that. If you wanted just a random line, for example, just this line which doesn't really belong to any standard angles or a dimension, you can do so just by clicking to the point of your interest, really. Now, what happens when we have? I'm going to press escape and come off it. What happens when I want to draw a new line? I can go back into the line tool, okay, and I can start on the end point here. Now, Solidworks, once again, is such a cute software. It's trying to be helpful in a way that it's showing that I am actually sitting at the endpoint now. So if I were to bring my cursor around here, and I can bring my cursor around to the endpoint, and a little indicator, endpoint indicator, pops up just to say I'm actually at the end of the line. And if I were to click now, I'm committing to the connection of those two lines, and it will start at that point. Okay. Now, I could choose to draw a line anywhere, but if I for some reason I wanted to draw it along this line, I can literally traverse the line, and another yellow indicator comes up that says you're actually coinciding, you're on the line. That's what the indicator says. There is also a midpoint on this line. So if I were to click there, notice how the indicator changes. It's showing us that I am about to commit to drawing a line that starts at the midpoint of that particular line, and so on and so forth. So there's a ton of help that's going on as we go. So if I were to say, right, I want to draw a line here, and I want to go across horizontal, and I can do that. And this is the dynamic help that pops up as a sketch. I don't need to worry too much about these things. I can control them as I'm sketching, or I can come back and I can always edit those. Okay, so for example, I have a little triangle there. Let's have a look in some of the other functions now. I'm going to press escape to come out of that, and box select and delete on the keyboard to let it go. I want to look at the humble rectangle. Now, every single time when we go into any of these features, the feature manager comes up and it shows you, or the property manager, and it shows you there are multiple layers within that particular command. Okay, so you could just draw a standard rectangle, which is, let's look at this in some detail. These icons have a meaning. Those numbers actually, they tell you the sequence of clicks. Okay, so first click and the second click. So you can say, I want to draw a rectangle which is corner to corner rectangle, or I want to draw a rectangle which is center to corner rectangle, or three corners, etc. And there are a ton of those rectangles which you probably may need to draw depending on your design intent. So for example, if I were to go into a standard rectangle here, which is corner to corner, this then allows me to do that. Fairly straightforward. You would expect the first click and the second click to be able to draw the rectangle. And then there are a bunch of these green indicators that have popped up. We'll look at them in a minute. We kind of know what they mean. Well, let's look at the second rectangle here. What does that mean? So I can click, okay, right. So this is my center to corner rectangle there. Once again, really handy feature. If you want to snap onto the center, if you want this rectangle to be snapped onto a pre-existing entity, you would use this particular function, okay? And that's, you know, eventually once you have enough practice of this, you would know which is the right feature to use. So let's look at our first rectangle here. What does this mean? All I did is I sketched a rectangle using a standard corner to corner clicks, and it produced this. Now, if I were to right, I can reshape and resize this literally by grabbing onto the end of it. Okay, that makes sense. What that really means is I haven't specified any sizes yet. I haven't told SolidWorks how big I want this rectangle to be. At the moment, this is infinitely big in both those directions. All I know about this rectangle right now, as we speak, is the fact that this line here is committed to be a vertical line. And this line here is committed to be horizontal. This is a vertical line and that's horizontal line. Right, and hence we can see the motion in that particular direction. All I'm doing is picking that endpoint up and I'm moving it, right? These were the indicators we looked at previously when we saw a line command, you know, where they pop up. Look at that yellow indicator there. They pop up just to say, well, this is the line. That line is forced to be horizontal, okay? Now these are called constraints. What that really means is you can add these constraints to any of your sketching entities to be able to constrain them in a certain way, okay? Or you could draw them with those constraints in place in the beginning. So for example, this rectangle, it came out of the box literally, and it picked those constraints for me. That's exactly what I wanted. However, if I didn't want that, and if I didn't have that shape in mind, I can actually let go of some of these constraints. So I can delete that little indicator just by the act of clicking and deleting from the keyboard. So that is gone. Let's have a look what it does now. Right, okay, look at that motion now. All of a sudden what I've done is I have let go of one of that degree of freedom, and I don't want that line to be restricted, and it is moving quite freely. For example, I can do exactly the same around here. I can say, right, delete that constraint too, and then it allows my rectangle to flex like this. Now, every time you are working on SolidWorks, it is necessary for you to keep an eye on little indicators like that. Most of the times you are trying to draw geometry and you think, actually, it's not functioning correctly. This is not what I wanted. What you're probably missing is a bunch of these little green indicators here. These are the snap indicators or the constraint indicators, which is dynamically present on the screen as you sketch, okay? So sometimes you can delete those if you don't need them, or you can bring them back, or you can add them. So for example, I wanted this line to be vertical only. Look at my heads up menu here. So the minute I select this line, SolidWorks is trying to help out by offering me a ton of options to click through. So I could literally click on this line here and make that line, force that line to be horizontal, or I can make it vertical, as SolidWorks is already highlighted that as a little bit of intuition. I could fix it. Let's not talk about fix because this is cheating, and there are a ton of things I can do following that. Let's not get into too many details of that. So let's say I can select that segment, and on the left hand side in the properties bar, I can make it horizontal or vertical. I want that line to be fixed as vertical. There we go. So that line now is constrained to be vertical only. What that really means is my rectangle will function like so. Okay, that makes sense because I managed to force it to stay vertical all along. Now let's look at this line here. Right, okay, let's constrain that. At the moment there is no constraint on that line, so I'm gonna have to try and constrain that. And easiest way to do that is basically from the heads up menu, that little pop-up menu that pops up, or you can just click horizontal from your properties manager, which then makes it horizontal like this. Okay, and all of a sudden your rectangle is more like rectangle. All those 4 lines are connected in some sort of meaningful fashion, and they will behave in that particular following those constraints. There is a ton of stuff you can do around these constraints. Okay, I'm going to let go of that rectangle for the time being. Let's have a look what happens when you go into a circle entity. Right, as I said previously, once you click on an entity, keep an eye on the left hand side. It might be giving you a ton of options that you need to use, right? So there are two circle types. One is centered to the edge, or the next one is called the perimeter circle. If you're not so sure about it, if you're not so sure about the term, you don't need to worry, you don't need to remember. All you got to do is bring your cursor there and it will prompt up what that particular circle type is. Once again, I'm going to go and draw myself a little circle here. Right, okay, cool. Click and drop to say, well, there we go, we have a circle there now. I want to draw probably another circle here, but I want that to be tangential to this circle. So can I be on this line? Oh yes, I can be. That's not tangential, I know. Maybe just draw a circle over here and then bring my point. Oh, there we go. I got an endpoint indicator prompting the fact that if I'm about to commit to that point now, I will make those 2 circles tangential. Or I could just carry on drawing another one if I didn't want it like that. So for some reason, I think I quite fancy that. I wanted those 2 circles to be tangential. So I can click and I can just admire the drawing I have done. Green tick to confirm. Okay. Now what happens when I move any of these? Right, so that gets bigger or smaller, but all I'm doing is grabbing onto the center of it. And I'm trying to probably relocate, reposition that. Maybe I wanted that to snap onto the origin. I could do that. Let it go, and then I'll stay locked in onto the origin. Let's see what happens when right, that moves. Can I move? Yes, I can move that. And look at the horizontal indicator that has popped up. So if I were to do this, all Solidworks saying is if you were to let go now, those 2 center points are going to be on a horizontal relationship to each other. Okay, so eventually, if you didn't want them to be at the same level, if you wanted them to be like that, you need to bear in mind that you did actually make that decision of keeping them at the same horizontal level. So I'm going to go leave them like that. I'm just making sure that it's committed to that. It is. So that is actually sitting at a horizontal level from that. What it is not doing is actually restricting it to stay that particular way. So for example, I cannot move this circle anymore because that is constrained to be at the origin. All I can probably do is make it bigger or smaller. What I cannot change the fact that the origin is now snapped onto the center of the circle, okay, or vice versa. So I cannot change that unless I were to delete that little indicator there. So I'm going to go delete that, and now I can relocate the center somewhere else. Here we go, like so. So let's have a look at this. Let's expand on this a little bit. There is obviously loads and loads going on here, which is obviously help. So I'm going to go create myself a rectangle. I want that rectangle, the center of the rectangle, to be snapped onto the origin. Now this is my favorite thing to do. The reason I do this because I then get the resultant geometry to be split quite nicely about all of my reference planes. You got the right plane, top plane, front plane. If I were to snap onto the center of this, it gives me equal distribution everywhere. So I know where the center of gravity is. You know, I am in total control if I did that. As against if I were to just draw a rectangle somewhere random. It is always a good idea to make a reference to the origin. So I'm going to go draw myself a nice little rectangle starting there. Okay, let's not worry about the sizing of that yet because we haven't done that. For example, I wanted to draw a circle here. Okay, that's fairly straightforward. I wanted that circle drawn. Point, right? Okay, maybe another circle here. But before we go ahead and do that, look at what's going on here. Horizontal, so that line is forced to be horizontal. This is a vertical line, so I know that. And that little green indicator is literally next to the element, so it shows that those are the properties of that particular element. We have a bunch of coincident indicators going on, and this line type is called a construction line. Okay, so this line is just to show that those vertices are actually in line. Okay, and obviously we use the center to corner rectangle type. Right, I'm going to go ahead and draw myself another circle at that corner. I will look for that yellow indicator that says I am at the end now. Right, okay, cool. And I can do that. And I can do that. Okay, fair enough. Now, if I were to move this corner, right, that happens, okay? Only because the circles where, when I clicked, I committed those circles to be locked onto the corner of the rectangle. And this makes complete sense. Now, they move like this. What will happen if I were to say, I don't want that line to be vertical anymore. Let's get rid of that indicator. And this will happen. It's quite nice and funky. I like it. I can control Z out of it, and I can make sure this line is locked to be vertical. That's sensible. Now you kind of have some idea of what these little green indicators actually mean. Okay, those are the constraints. Now there is a lot more you can do with these indicators. For example, if you select two entities instead of just selecting one. So if you select one, so for example this circle here, it will give you the properties of the circle, you know, where that is sitting in your Cartesian frame, what is the diameter or the radius of that, etc. So we'll look at that in some detail. Let's not worry about the dimensioning of it. And whether there are any existing relationship. At the moment there aren't any relationships, so does that mean I can move it out of the way? No, I can't. That's locked in onto the rectangle there. What I can do, however, is I can multi-select. So since this is a Windows software, I'm going to go and using Shift on my keyboard, I'm going to select these two circles, right? The minute you do that, everything changes. You got loads of options in front of you. So what does that really mean? In your properties manager, since you have selected those items, which are in the blue box there, you can make those two circles co-radial. You can make those tangential, you can make those concentric, equal, fixed, and equal curve length. So there are a ton of options. Remember, this is all in context, okay? So depending on what you actually select, that menu will change. So if I were to say, can I make those two circles equal, please? And what that really means is they are not going to change in size. So if I were to drag this one out, the other one grows. Look at that. How do I know that? If I'm looking at someone else's drawing, there are some indicators on here. So that equalsify means those two circles are meant to be exactly the same. I can select that circle, and in your properties manager, it will show there is an existing relationship with this particular circle here. Okay, and if I didn't want that, I can right click and delete it from this space here, or I can delete those relations from here. But I think I quite like it like this. Okay, so I'm going to keep it like that. Right, look at that. Now, what can I do to make sure that all of these are exactly the same sizes? Well, it's easy. I can say this circle and this particular circle is also equal. Okay, so we got something going on here. Or I could have done all of that in one go just to say that and that is also equal. Obviously, long-winded way of doing this stuff. However, we're getting somewhere. As you may realize now, I never specified the size of this, and that's not really a problem anymore, because whatever size I pick for one circle, all of them are going to replicate. So all I'm doing is grabbing onto the edge of the circle and dragging that just to see what effect it will have on others. And clearly my constraints, which are quite a few now on this graphics area, they are in action, and they're showing they're working, and there's a full connection between that circle and the rest of the mechanism. Okay,